Hi, everybody, and greetings from very cold and misty Ireland. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this first live stream of 2024. Now, usually I have my friend and fantastic virtual assistant, Shauna, helping me, but Shauna is currently in Australia, and I am going to be manning this whole video and the live stream by myself. This is going to mean it's a little bit more difficult for me to check your comments and questions, and you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. But it's really wonderful to see all the regions of the world that you are tuning in from. So feel free to drop your part of the world and say hi in the comments, and afterwards I will be able to enjoy where you're all watching from. So those of you who are familiar with me and my work or know me well, you understand that one of my biggest passions is eco-printing. The phrase is "in the dirty pot," and that means coloring textiles using vegetation, but without working with traditional powdered mordants. So for example, this upcycled jumper that I'm wearing, I bought this in a thrift store or an op shop in Australia, and I eco-printed that using leaves that students who I was teaching had left over in the class. And this would be my more usual form of teaching. But what I wanted to share with you is how to actually move a little bit further and how you can dye fabric as well with certain vegetation successfully in the dirty pot or a reactive pot. And that natural dye can really enhance your eco prints. So for example, if I put this image up on my screen here, you can see that on the left, there is some eco-printed wool fabric. And then on the right, there are some samples of dyed silk on the top and dyed wool on the bottom of the samples. And they are in a variety of colors that really, really complement the actual eco prints. And in fact, the jumper that I'm wearing, I've extended the sleeves of this with some dyed wool. I believe this was naturally dyed, probably with weld, but I got it in a jumble sale at the place where I was teaching. So it was a really good complement to some of these greener prints on this jumper or sweater. And I love the combination of the plain fabric with the printed. So my promise is that after this live stream, which won't be too long, you will have the knowledge necessary to actually give this a go yourself. And you will be doing so in an environmentally mindful, a health conscious way. And I'm also going to share with you how you can use the microwave to do this process, as well as a reactive pot. So for those of you who live in a part of the world where you can't necessarily work outside at the moment, or if you are trying to conserve energy or want to work on a small project, dyeing using natural materials in the microwave is great fun. So my promise is you will know the basics of how I do this, and I hope you enjoy it. So try and turn off your phones so you don't have any distraction, and that way you will get the most out of the session. So as I've said, there is a natural progression from eco-printing to wanting to dye fabric to combine with your prints. And the good news is it is simple and it is fun. And at the beginning, you're going to have questions. And I'm not quite sure how many of you who are watching now. We have people as well joining in from Holland, from Tennessee, from Wisconsin. So people coming in from all over the world. I'm not sure how familiar you are to eco printing without using traditional powdered mordants. But really all this means is we're not using the powdered metal salts. We are harnessing the power of the composition of our metal pot to influence the color and help make our pieces washable and color fast. And I would like to say that if you have already studied with me before, either in a free training like this or in a paid event like a workshop or my eco print and wet felt club, every single thing that I print or that I dye myself, I put through the washing machine, including things like this merino jumper, the sweater, and the silk scarf that I'm wearing. These all go through my washing machine on the wool setting. So please be assured that what I'm sharing with you, I'm going to talk about limited vegetation and fabric, but you will get results that are substantive and stand the test of time. So the first thing I would like to chat about is the actual fabric you work with. And when we are naturally dyeing in a reactive pot, I recommend, first of all, that you work in an aluminium pot. That's the first thing. So that would be the same pot that I would recommend you work with if you were going to start eco printing with me. And the simple answer about the fabric is that not all fabric gives you the same results. And in the very same way that I recommend you start with wool or silk if you are starting to eco print, I recommend that protein-based fabric, which is fabric that has come from an animal, so wool, silk, cashmere, or mohair, those fabrics are by far the easiest to dye without using powdered mordants. So cellulose fabric is linen, cotton, ramie, anything that has come from a plant base. And I would like to be very clear, because I do not want people who join or who watch this on the replay and don't hear me saying it. If I am naturally dyeing using homegrown vegetation, such as weld, which I grow in my dye borders, I cannot work without traditional powdered mordants. I need to mordant my fabric first in order for it to retain the color and be washable and color fast. So when I am working without the powdered mordants, I am only recommending for other people and for myself that you work with protein-based fabric and that you use limited vegetation. And so I'll explain about the vegetation in a minute. So the fabric that is easiest to start with is protein-based. And to prepare that fabric, wash your fabric by hand, or my preference is to put it through the wool cycle in my modern washing machine. And this means that I can batch wash my garments or my fabric or my handmade felt, and use a gentle soap, not a commercial detergent. So my recommendation is that you get a soap such as an olive oil or a goat's milk soap, and you can get those in health food stores. But if you live in North America, I have found that Dr. Bonner's soap is also excellent. It's gentle enough to use for this purpose. But don't go for a commercial washing liquid or a detergent, even if it says it's eco-friendly or very green, because what usually happens is they have natural stain blasters, maybe lemon juice in them, and they can prevent you getting good saturation of color when you are printing or dyeing. So obviously you need to wash your delicate wool, silk, and cashmere at a cooler temperature than your cellulose fabric. Now, I'm saying not to really use cellulose fabric for this, but at the end, if you remind me, I will tell you one sort of vegetation you could try. But if you're going to wash cellulose fabric, prepare it in hot water. But I recommend you don't use this at the beginning until you have more experience. And then to get the most intense natural dye color, soak all your fabric in plain water in a bath or a bucket overnight before you have a dyeing session. And that will help all the fibers sort of relax. They absorb the water. And then when you put them into the dye bath, they will really have a better chance of absorbing the color. The next thing you are going to do is going to gather your vegetation. Now, here I have got 2 pots and they have different eucalyptus leaves in them. Eucalyptus leaves are my absolute favorite, along with onion skins, because they never fail to release some sort of color. And for the purpose of natural dyeing, I like to segregate or separate my leaves. So that pot on the left-hand side with the rounder leaves, I gathered these leaves, windfall leaves, from my own trees. And I know that all those leaves actually give red color. And then on the right-hand side, I have a pot with a mixture of different eucalyptus leaves and some eucalyptus bark. Not all of those give red color. And the reason I have separated these is that I wanted to do some really strong reds. So the 3 samples here on the bottom, the 2 samples on the right were printed using the leaves in that left-hand saucepan. So the bottom 2 pieces of wool, they were printed from those leaves on the left. And then the third piece of wool on the bottom left, the more golden color, that was actually printed using these, or dyed, apologies, using the leaves in the and bark in the pot on the right-hand side. So you can see that there are different colors available from the leaves. And I will explain at the end why the 2 samples on the right-hand side at the bottom, why one of them is darker than the other, but they were both dyed using those leaves in that left-hand pot. Now, you can also choose to use onion skins. And once I've gone through these slides, I will share with you step-by-step dyeing a pair of arm warmers in the microwave, and I used onion skins. But when I am working on bigger projects, I love using my own eucalyptus leaves in a big aluminium pot. So when you're preparing your natural dye, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Excuse me, it is live. So it's very, very simple. All I did was I had plenty of eucalyptus leaves in a pot, and I just filled the pot about 3/4 full with water. I use my own well water, but honestly, you can use water from your regular city supply or from a river or a stream. Personally, I don't find that that makes a big difference or any difference when you are working without mordants. You might think that the chemicals in the water will affect the results, but I have not found that to be the case, providing I bring my natural dye liquid to a boil. This is before I add fabric. And in this case, what I like doing often is adding the water and leaving the leaves soak for a day or 2 in the pot, then bringing it to a boil and maybe leaving it on my wood burning stove just to simmer away without any fabric in it. And then that's why I say be mindful of energy use. So the eucalyptus leaves were very dry there. So by soaking them for a day or 2, it was already starting to help them, almost decompose and release color. And then I brought the pot liquid up to a boil, and I gave it a bit of a boil until I was happy with the color. But I wouldn't have put my loose fabric in when the liquid was really boiling. So that is one difference from eco printing and dyeing the fabric. So when I'm dyeing the fabric, I want to get saturation of color everywhere. I'm not tying a really tight bundle, and I don't want the fabric to shrink. There is a bigger chance it will shrink when you are naturally dyeing, because the fabric is loose in the pot, and you need to make sure there is enough fabric or enough liquid for the quantity of fabric you're doing. So make sure to remember safety at all times. The usual things: wear good shoes, have tongs for handling things when you're taking them in and out of the pot. Make sure to have gloves. You know, you don't want to burn yourself, so have good gloves on your hands if you're dealing with hot pots. And then when you are adding your fabric to the dye pot, I would let the dye liquid, I would let it cool down quite a bit. It would not be boiling. You could even let it cool overnight and put your fabric in the next day when it's totally cold, and then bring it up to a higher temperature. So you've soaked your fabric overnight, so it's already wet and it's you know, already nice and moist. And then you want to carefully add your damp fabric to your dye bath. And if I am working with eucalyptus leaves or onion skins, I like to put some vinegar in as well. Vinegar is not a mordant, it's a modifier. And vinegar actually helps me get more intensity of color, but it is not a chemical mordant. But I do find I like the results best when I include some vinegar in the pot. And I'm not quite sure how easy it is for you to see, but I actually have vegetation in this pot as well. So I usually leave my leaves in the pot, or onion skins, but you can remove them if you prefer. Or a tip is you can get what in Ireland we would call a pair of tights, but you might call them pantyhose. And you can actually stuff your natural dye material, your dry leaves or onion skins, into pantyhose and tie them a little bit like a sausage. And instead of having the vegetation loose in the pot, you can have the pantyhose in with that. And that can actually be quite fun as well. And it prevents loose bits of vegetation getting stuck in your fabric. So I leave the vegetation in the pot, but you can take it out if you prefer. And note that I'm pushing this down into the pot with a wooden spoon. The spoon is just on the right-hand side of the screen. And what I want is to make sure that all the fabric is totally submerged under the pot liquid. I want to try and get the most even color on my fabric. I don't want it to be blotchy. And then and you're going to see step by step in a minute with the arm warmers, but I just want to say that I leave the fabric in the pot, and I bring that temperature up until it's maybe steaming a little bit. I don't bring it to a boil. And I like keeping that pot at that temperature for about an hour. Then I take the pot off the cooker, and I usually leave my fabric in the pot overnight before taking it out. But several times during the natural dye session, I will check that the fabric hasn't floated up to the surface of my pot, and I will push it back underneath, because the last thing I want is for the fabric to be uneven. Now, has anybody got any questions about that? You know, what I've talked about up to now, and then I'll just mention the washing there in a second. Because if you have any question, if you could put it in the comments now, please, and just put 3 question marks in front and 3 question marks behind, because that will help me pick up your questions if you leave them as a comment. As I said, I'm working by myself today, and I don't have Shauna to help field the questions. So if you do have questions, 3 question marks in front, 3 behind, and I can see them easier. So the final part is, after you are happy with the color, you need to remember that when you rinse your naturally dyed fabric, it is actually going to look a little bit paler after you have washed it and dried it. So you need to wash your fabric until the water runs clear. But I would say that just make sure the color is darker than you anticipate you want it, and then you will be very happy. But this does take a little bit of experimenting. And then for the aftercare, remember not to hang your textiles in strong light, and to wash them always with the same gentle soap that you actually prepared the fabric with in the first place. And I see that we have some questions coming in, so I'm going to answer these, then I'm going to go on and share about using the microwave and go through the whole process of doing something, and I have a couple of little video clips to show you as well. So the first thing, question is here, and this person is asking what other sort of vegetation. I'm going to talk about that afterwards a little bit, but this is an introduction to the process. This is not a comprehensive paid workshop. I'm introducing you to this process, but I will tell you at the end a couple of other things. So Breege here. Breege is asking how much vinegar to water. So Breege, that really depends on the size of your pot and how big an amount of fabric you are printing, and how much vegetation. When you are working with mordants, you measure everything very accurately, and you would be working with a specific weight of mordant, a specific weight of a tannin, a specific weight of a dye material based on the weight of your fabric. When I'm working without the mordants, I like to use plenty of vegetation for the deepest color. So I might even sometimes almost fill a pot with leaves, create a really good dye solution, then remove some of the leaves so there's space for the fabric. And then when I add my vinegar, I might add half a liter or a liter. So that would be a couple of pints. And you won't go astray by adding more vinegar. So don't worry if you add more vinegar. If you are working with eucalyptus or onion skin, those are the only 2 vegetations that I use vinegar with, because they both give me better color when there is vinegar in the pot. And then in relation to pots, Mac is asking where to find aluminium pots that are very large. This is a great question, because whether you are an eco printer working without mordants or a natural dyer wanting to try this, I find mine, the first one I found, it took me 6 months to find it, and it was before I was eco printing, but I was hosting an international artist, and he needed a big aluminium pot, and I eventually tracked one down. It was only 40 liters, which isn't huge, and I tracked that down in a commercial kitchen supply company. But I'm not sure, Mac, what part of the world you live in. But for example, in France, you can get 40-liter aluminium pots for making jam. You can get them in most sort of hardware or bigger department-y kind of hardware stores. In America, places like Costco, you might get one, or Walmart. But the better pots are actually older ones, and they come from charity shops and from salvage yards. And if you're lucky, if you put the word out, you will find pots. So my largest pot fits 240 liters of liquid, And that would be big enough for me to get in. It's like a hot tub size. So that came from France, and it had been used on a farm for boiling potatoes. You just need to keep your eyes open, to be honest. And then here's an interesting question from Carol. And Carol is asking, when is the best time of year to collect leaves, and when do they have the most potent dye? So, Carol, in relation to eucalyptus leaves, and bark, they give fantastic natural dye at any time of the year. But yesterday I was actually at the Arboretum, and even though I have planted over 900 eucalyptus trees on my own property, I still gathered 3 big sacks of leaves from my 3 favorite trees because I know they give a good red color. And I'm very, very happy to buy, or to collect brown leaves. I'm going to go back to that image again. So if you look here, these leaves are windfall leaves, and they are very, very dry. And they are very brown. They give fantastic color. And if they're wet, I still collect them as well. They're starting to sort of decompose slightly, but they release a lot of natural dye. So never be afraid of gathering windfall eucalyptus leaves or bark. They have fantastic dye all the time, and different varieties give different color. So Candice's question about identifying the aluminium, or aluminum if you live in America, we have an extra I in it here in Ireland and in England. But Anne has very helpfully said that aluminium is not magnetic. So you can actually test whether a pot is aluminium if you want to identify the pot. So thank you, Anne, for sharing that. And I find also, if the pot has been used before, I think you get used to identifying them. Some aluminium pots say aluminium on them, but the thicker ones, they look almost like a silver color. They're not shiny like stainless steel. And I personally have no trouble identifying them myself. And here's another really helpful comment, and I'm not sure who's put this up, Eagle Rider, but hi. And the Chinese supermarket in Dundee does big catering pots. So Chinatowns and Indian stores actually often have big pots. But there is one issue that you need to be careful about. And that is, if you are eco-printing, you are familiar with adding maybe some rusty metal into your pot. If you decide that you need to modify the color, which I'll mention briefly at the end, and you're going to have rusty metal in your natural dye bath, you need to be very careful with the very light aluminium, very, very thin walled pots from Chinese stores or Indian stores. I like to have really thick walled pots that are at least, between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick, probably about 1/4 inch thick. 1/2 inch thick is really thick, but my old pots are all much thicker. If they are thin, you will develop holes incredibly quickly in them, and there's nothing more disappointing than getting a big hole in your pot. So I recommend, there's no problem using them for natural dye, but I think you need to be very cautious if you decide to modify the color, which I will talk about at the very end briefly. So I'm going to answer the next few questions, and then we will, I just want to show you some more slides and a little video. Okay, so we have here, Kathleen is asking, where can she find eucalyptus varieties in the USA? And she lives in the Northeast. So if I'm somewhere like Michigan, Kathleen, what I do is I actually would go and I would get them from a florist. And if you have shops like Trader Joe's, anything like that, or Whole Foods, often the florists or the bouquets of flowers there, they will have plenty of different eucalyptus varieties, and that's the easiest way of getting them if you live quite far north. And then Anne is asking, where do you get big quantities of onion skins? Now, I get them from my butcher and I ask my friends, but I only have one friend, sadly, who collects them. Most people don't understand that even a few onion skins are great. And for those of you who don't know, the scarf that I'm wearing now was eco-printed with onion skins. Now, okay. So here's a question about natural dye. I like to natural dye and eco-print my fabric in one go. What boiling temperature is the best in that case? Now, is it the lower one for dyeing or the higher for eco-printing, or do I use an aluminium pan? Okay, I have to say that this is not really the topic of this presentation, but what I would say to you is I work without traditional powdered mordants. Many people who eco-print and they use dye blankets, they need to work on mordanted fabric. And in that case, they are dyeing and eco-printing at the one time. There's nothing to stop you using the dirty pot method, which is working without mordant in a reactive pot. There's nothing to stop you creating your bundles and putting them into the natural dye bath. But in that case, you need to treat them as if you are eco-printing, and then you need to boil them. However, the issue is going to be that the base of the fabric, all the fabric won't get colored by the dye, only whatever is on the outside of your bundle. So I think that is something, I don't want to confuse people, but you can certainly eco-print in a natural dye bath, but you need to boil your pieces. But if you're doing that, I would not have loose fabric in the pot at the same time, because it will shrink if you are not careful, because the temperature is higher. And then I'm just going to check one or two other questions, but I would like to move on and share some more slides. So I did see, excuse me, one second. Yeah. Okay, great question. Another one. And I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name, so apologies, but I would say Katrien, but that's probably incorrect. Can I use my homemade Ivy soap to wash the tissue or the fabric? So in general, I would say you can use any homemade soap. Unless you have a lot of chemicals in it, I would say definitely you can use it. I have some friends who make soap, and they often give me soap when I give them some, studio supplies and things that maybe I'm not 100% happy with, and they can use them in their own crafting, and they give me handmade soap. So any handmade soap that I have ever used has worked very well. Okay. Okay, so Anna is saying that she collects onion skins from grocery stores like Food Max. Yes, that's a really, really good thing. And I was only discussing this with my friend Jette in Denmark last night, and she has had somebody in a supermarket, and they would always allow her come in and collect the onion skins. So the grocery stores definitely are a great place. So thank you for that, Anna. And then Shasha is asking, do I save the liquid after the session? So yes, if I am using eucalyptus leaves or bark as a natural dye, yes, I save the liquid and I would use it again. But if I want to use a large quantity of fabric in it again, I might top it up with some more fresher eucalyptus leaves, some new leaves. But the eucalyptus contains an awful lot of dye. But if I am working with onion skins, I can only use them once, because they do something that's called exhaust. And what that means is they release all their dye into the pot liquid, and the fabric always absorbs it. It's almost like the dye jumps into the fabric. So if I use onion skins, I cannot reuse that. The skins, I need to add more skins. But if I am using eucalyptus, I would definitely use it again. Okay, so that's the end of questions for a minute. I would like to actually share with you something and just share some videos or some images first. Now, what I want to say is I have dyed these felt arm warmers in my microwave, and I'm just going to share the images of the step-by-step process. But what I want to say is, clearly, I cannot put metal in my microwave. And this is another reason, if you are starting to do this, you can actually use a large stainless steel pot if you have one. You will get subtly different colors than if you use an aluminium pot. But in the case of the microwave, I dyed these, and I actually have them here beside me, these simple felt arm warmers in a glass container, because you can't put metal in the microwave. And so the glass is non-reactive. Stainless steel is non-reactive. So if you do have a stainless steel pot, you could use onion skins. I would put at least a pint of vinegar and plenty of onion skins. The color may not be quite as light fast as aluminium, but you definitely can use stainless steel. So here we go. I'm going to flip through these slides. So the microwave is really good for smaller projects. And also it is more economical from the fuel use perspective. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. And you need to gather your supplies. So in my case, they were felt arm warmers. So I soaked those arm warmers in water overnight, so they were wet. I had dry onion skins. They're actually in that bag that's at the back, that eco-printed bag. I hang that door on my larder, or the bag on my larder door, and I put all the onion skins when I am cooking. I just put the onion skins in the bag, and then I use them for printing or natural dyeing. And by the way, if you're enjoying this, please do hit the like button, because YouTube will send this out to more people afterwards. So if you like what you're hearing, feel free to hit that like button. Okay, so I wanted to get some contrast. And if I go back to that first slide, you can see that I've got some white stripes. I wanted to make these a little bit of fun. Now, I decided to use what we call clothes pegs, but if you live in North America, you might call them clothes pins. So they act as a resist, and when I put them on, they pinch the felt, and they made it easy for the to make that felt not absorb the onion skin color. But I had to be very careful, because I almost used the ones that have a little spring clip, and of course they have metal in them, and that would have caused an explosion in my microwave. So you need to make sure you could clamp some fabric with rubber bands, or you could tie it with string, but definitely do not put any metal in your microwave. And so then I needed water, and I always use vinegar. So I did use vinegar for this. So then I created my dye bath by adding the onion skins to my glass container. And in this case, I half filled it with water, and I microwaved it on high until it was boiling. And then I added the vinegar. And then these are my wet felt arm warmers. I pushed the clothes pegs very firmly onto these. And I realized that even though it would have been fun to have stripes on both sides of them, I wasn't going to fit them into my glass container if I had them sticking out on both sides. Now, I know in some parts of the world, you probably have bigger microwaves than we have here in Ireland. So it might be that you can, have more pegs, but that was all I could fit on mine. So then I let the dye bath cool down a little bit, and then I carefully added my damp felt into the dye bath, pushing it under. And I used a silicone food tongs to push it all under, and the wooden spoon. Then I topped the container up as necessary. You can actually see the wooden spoon there on the left-hand side, or you can see a bit of it. I pushed the felt under the pot liquid, and I then topped it up with more water, because you always want, when you're dyeing, to have the fabric totally covered by your liquid. And there is a question here about, did I use red and brown onion skins or use them separately? And I find that for me, what we call brown onions here in Ireland, they give much better color for me than the red. So I would always use the brown onion skins. I've no problem if there are a few red in, but they don't give such a good color, I don't find. So then I process the piece on high. So I put the lid back on the pot and made sure that the pot liquid came up just to a boil and didn't evaporate. And you need to understand that you often get evaporation in the microwave. So you have to make sure to keep topping up the pot liquid so that it's covering whatever you're working with. And you can open up and reposition the felt. So move it around a little bit and rotating it, and keep going until you're happy with the color that it is. However, if you want to save some energy, what I did was I would zap it for maybe 10 minutes or between 10 and 20 minutes. And then I would take the bowl out, I would wrap it in a towel. And you can see there, I've actually put it in the bottom of my big range, and the door is open at that stage, but I've put it in with that towel wrapped around it, and it would stay hot for almost an hour. So that meant I only needed a few sessions in the microwave zapping it. Then I wrapped it in the towel, left it in a warm place for an hour or so, and I kept doing that until I was happy enough with the color. But you can also leave your pieces in the dye bath, as I said. You can leave them overnight to deepen the color. But the important thing is to remember that they will lighten a little bit once they are washed out and dried. And to finish, just wash them in the warm water, the same as you would for any eco-printed fabric, using that gentle soap, and wash until the water runs clear. Don't think when you're washing your pieces. I do find that often people say, "Ooh, there's a lot of color coming out of my piece. I don't want to wash it away," if it's a print. And it's the same with natural dyeing. If you are washing your pieces and color is washing away, that is color that your fabric has not absorbed. And the washing is not going to, not washing is not going to mean that the color has been absorbed by the fabric. You need always to wash until your pieces run clear. And that way you can confidently wear them or sell them, because you don't want any color rubbing off on white furniture, for example, afterwards. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to just share with you, let me just see here. I have a little video, and I'm not quite sure what the sound will be like, but it actually shows me taking some samples out of a pot. And then I will show you a couple of images and one other little video and answer one or two more questions, and that's it. So I hope this video plays. It's the first time I've ever played one online. So let's have a go and we see. It's only a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to reveal the color on these samples that I'm dyeing. Both are in aluminium pots, and this first pot here, this is a silk sample. This pot contains Eucalyptus nicolii leaves and also Eucalyptus gunnii azura. So these both give red eco prints, and this silk has taken on a beautiful color. Ooh, but wow, look at the wool. Look how vibrant this is. So you can see that the wool, which is more densely woven, this actually looks more red than the silk. And these were only in the pot for approximately 2.5 hours at temperature. Then I let them cool down and I've taken them out. In this other pot, let's see what these colors are like. This is actually black tea that I made up yesterday, brought to a boil, and then I've left these pieces soaking in the tea overnight. It's the same wool, and you can see a totally different color palette there.
see what the silk is like. It's important to note as well that the pieces do look slightly darker when they're wet, but this is really nice. I love the difference in colours, but they are harmonious between the red giving eucalyptus and the black tea.
So for people asking what other vegetation you could use, I like using things that I know give color that's going to last and be washable and color fast. And I like keeping things simple. So black tea is something else that you can use very successfully. And if you are trying to be more mindful of the environment and not wasting things, if you have a plastic bucket and you use tea leaves or tea bags and you make your tea in a teapot, throw any leftover tea into the bucket for a while, and then you can actually use that for dyeing, or just make a big batch of tea, you know, with boiling water and tea bags, let it brew, and then you can use that for dyeing. And so I'm going to just show one other little very short video. Could you ever just write comments? Could you hear that video, please? Just say yes or no in the comments, because I can't tell whether you could hear that. So I'd really appreciate if somebody would just do either thumbs up or say yes, they could hear the video, just so I make sure that you can hear it. Any comments? Okay, excellent. So Chantel has said, yes, it was clear. Nancy, thank you very much, because I don't want people who come in and watch on the replay, you know, as the recording, not to be able to hear. So thank you very much. Okay, that's great. So after those pieces came out of the pot, I did one thing. I did a modification of color, and then I'll play the next video. So when you look at these samples that I put up at the very beginning, you can see that the bottom right set of 3 wool samples, the piece on the very right-hand side is darker. And so to get that darker color, what I actually did was I put a piece of rusty metal into my dye bath. But if I removed the other fabric out first, but by doing that, that pot liquid would always be darker. So if you choose to do that, you need to be aware that if you add rusty metal in after you've dyed it, it will make your pieces darker. And I love that darker red, but you won't be able to lighten that up again afterwards. So that is just how I got that darker color. So what I'm going to do now is just play another little video, and this is just showing me after, or showing you, I'm talking after I had washed these pieces and I have them spread out on an ironing board. So let me just add this in, and as well as dyeing fabric with eucalyptus leaves and vegetation, such as these pieces here. There are some really fun kitchen ingredients that you can consider using. So these 2 samples here, this beautiful warm gold color on the wool and on this silk. This color is from pomegranate rind. And then here, this is a warm color from black tea. This is the same black tea on wool. And then this here is black tea with modification of some rusty metal on silk, and the same on wool. So if I even just put the two tea samples, and I combine them with these samples of eucalyptus printed vegetation, you can just see how complementary all these natural colors are together. And I think it's wonderful when you're eco-printing to have the option of maybe dyeing some fabric as well, so you can combine your eco-printed fabric with naturally dyed plain fabric, and all prepared in an environmentally mindful and health conscious way. So I just wanted to share with you those finished pieces, and you can actually see here some more samples, all against the background of an eco-printed piece of wool. And for those of you who are interested in eco printing, there are some comments and questions relating to eco printing, and I will be hosting some eco printing live streams towards the end of this month. So keep your eyes open. Register for my newsletter if you like that, if that's something that would interest you. Lucia is saying that green tea leaves and a post iron mordant dip makes a fantastic dark gray. Now, that's interesting because Chantel was asking, does green tea work also? And because I don't work with the powdered mordants, I would put the rusty metal in. I have not, I have used green tea if I've used mordants, but it's not something I use in the dirty pot that I don't personally like the effect. But if you're actually using, mordants, green tea, green tea would definitely be something to consider. But I do really love pomegranate, and pomegranate is a natural dye and very high in tannin. And pomegranate is beautiful with rusty metal as well. So that will give gorgeous shades of gray when you're dyeing. And I just wanted to finish up here, just sharing this image here. So this is a coat that I made. It is called the Brooklyn coat, and the pattern is by Tessuti Fabrics. It's a simple coat that works very well in boiled wool, or in this case, this is felt. And the felt is quite textured because it's really a Nuno felt. It's with silk fabric and wool. And the printed fabric was actually, I had a commission for Australia, and this fabric was one of the pieces I was making, but I didn't use it for the final commission. So I wanted to make the coat, but I didn't want everything to be printed. And so I dyed the collar and the sleeves with the eucalyptus. You can actually see one of my eucalyptus trees behind me in that image. And I was very happy with the result of that. So I will just remove that image, and here is the front of it. So I put the cuffs, the bottom of the cuff is eco printed, and the coat itself is printed, and the collar and the sleeves are naturally dyed. So I hope Oops, that's wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that. And Laurie is saying she loves the green
as well.
That green is a commercial knitted sweater. It's made in Ireland. It's from an Aran wool, so that was definitely not naturally dyed. That was commercially dyed in a woolen mill. So look, thank you all so much. I've really appreciated your company, and I hope you enjoyed that. As I say, I will be hosting an eco printing live stream towards the end of the month. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in eco printing without the powdered mordants. And I will be happy to answer more eco printing questions then. And I'm just going to go back because there was a question that came in well before this live stream started that I would like to answer, because Teresa, I'm not sure if you're here now, Teresa, but she's just finished watching my bootcamp videos. They're all available on YouTube free. And she started her dirty pot, but she thinks she might have put too much rusty metal in it because it's black. And she's asking, is that normal? And the answer, Teresa, is yes. If you had other vegetation in your pot, if you had eucalyptus or onion skins and the liquid is looking dark, that is very normal. It's not called the dirty pot for nothing. It does look quite dirty. So I would not be concerned about that unless maybe you added other vegetation. Sometimes people who are beginning often add all sorts of different vegetation. And if it's high in tannin, it will have a reaction with the metal. And then that may make everything very, very dark. So I'm not sure what you put in your pot. But look, thanks so much. And I'm just seeing, oh, wow, my great buddy, Dawn. Dawn is my twin. We were in Australia together recently, both teaching, and we had a few lovely days on the coast together. And Nancy, thank you. This is great. I'm loving seeing all your comments. And Andrea is asking, will a recording of this be available? Yes, Andrea, I think it takes a few minutes before it's available, but it will be available on YouTube afterwards. And so you can catch the beginning again. Thank you all so much. This is lovely. Woo, look at these. It's really nice seeing all these comments. And because Shauna usually fields them, I don't usually read them all because I can't concentrate on everything. You're welcome, Kevin. Sheila, thanks for saying the coat is fantastic. Thank you all so much. This is lovely. And it's interesting when you say you're creative. So much of it is, if you learn if you learn the foundation of something correctly, whether it's working with or without mordants, it's much easier then to experiment. But if you jump ahead and try to start without having the foundation, it's a lot more difficult. And you can be more creative when you have a bit of an idea of what's going to happen. Yeah, we are identical twins, Dawn. So thank you all so much. I'm about to go and release Pip, my collie, from confinement, because she usually barks. So yes, it's going to be available as a recording. Thank you all for your time. Chantel, you'll be able to watch the beginning as a recording. Another person loving the coat. Love from France, love back to France. This is really nice. Wow, there's more and more comments coming in. And thank you all so much. I really appreciate you, one and all. Andrea is the last. Thank you, Andrea. Over and out from rural Ireland, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you at the next live stream. Oh, and if you're watching on the replay, do ask questions, but bear in mind that I would prefer to answer questions just about this natural dyeing one, and then in the eco printing one that's going to come up, I will answer eco printing questions. And I'm going to leave with Candace here and just these other ones. Candace, thanks for that lovely comment. Over and out, folks. Have a fantastic evening or morning wherever you live. Bye.